turning and turning in the widening gyre. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. The centre cannot hold. Things drift apart. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. That's as quoted from the works of W.B. Yeats by Dr. Robert Malone in a blog post on his Substack, where he tears apart, rips apart the new movie Died Suddenly and its author Stu Peters, and deservedly so. He says he's an absolute low-level scum, and I say worse. I say he's a CIA fake. So we'll be getting into that, but let's just leave it at Robert's words for the moment as he takes a look at the sins of information warfare in this blog post, and he asks, do the sins of opposition wash our own sins clean? He describes the new movie, the Died Suddenly, as a video which includes segments which are misleading at best, falsely imply one or more cause-effect relationship between a sudden death event and a vaccine administration, or otherwise employ cinematic license to stoke outrage. And as he says, I've previously written regarding the business model of stoking outrage for the up-and-coming podcaster. And in my opinion, the strategy is fundamentally the same as the fear porn business model of corporate media, and in particular CNN. So fear porn is what he says. It's a similar dynamic. Let me assure you, he goes on, that I've no time or interest in further engagements with Stu Peters. He is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned, a modern carnival barker. There is nothing in this Died Suddenly which represents new news. As far as I can tell, this seems to be mostly a sensationalized but quite well-produced video covering information which has been known for quite some time. So considering that the good doctor has got an impeccable scientific reputation, we can take it from the horse's mouth that the Died Suddenly is in fact horse's dung. Now, let's take a closer look at the mainstream media response to this movie. This is from the BBC. They're having a party, folks. They're having an absolute party with this movie, which Dr. Malone says has really done us no good. They died suddenly. Then the anti-vax trolling started. Of course, these are doing the same thing that Stu Peters is doing. I'm not like letting the mainstream off the hook. And so they show this couple, and they show this sad case, and it is indeed sad. It is true. It is sad. Of where a death which was, we can see, explicable, easily explicable, was used by this movie, and how this caused grief and distress to the affected individuals. Yeah, but they're pulling your heartstrings rather than examining the issues at the heart of the movie. So that's the BBC. Forbes are at the same kind of stuff, except new Died Suddenly film pushes unfounded depopulation claims about COVID-19 vaccine. That puzzled me. Were we arguing about whether there was a health safety risk with the vaccines, or were we arguing global depopulation as a result of a vaccine? I think it would have been better to argue the narrower case. However, this is what they're doing with it. Died Suddenly. This anti-vaccine documentary needs to die suddenly. Earlier this week, a previously unheard of documentary film premiered on Twitter titled Died Suddenly. In the span of 3 days, the film has received over 1.6 million views on its Twitter broadcast. What on earth is Died Suddenly, and why has it captivated the attention of millions? Well, the article explains the film is yet another desperate attempt by the anti-vax community to prove a ridiculous point. See? So, you see what's going on. They wouldn't touch this stuff with a 40-foot pole when you had cogent, good, high-quality arguments. Out comes some movie that is laced with absolute errors and misinformation and hyperbole and they're all over it. They love it. That's what they want, and they are feeding on this in a feeding frenzy. The anti-vaccine documentary Died Suddenly wants you to feel, not think. They're right. Can't argue with them there. But then again, BBC played those emotion games with us too. And just going right to the heart of this, we come to one example, for example, of the errors which are in this. Stu Peters, the review says, interviewed a woman who claimed that Canadian physicians were dropping like flies in the prime of their lives. You might have seen the story going around. Peters didn't mince words. We know 100% what's going on. They want to cover it up. The doctors are dying. And they're dying from these stupid shots. Reality check. The average age at which these 10 physicians died was 82. That's the problem with the kind of stuff Stu Peters is putting out. And here's more. Watch this from the beginning of the movie. In the opening montage of the film, interspersed with clips related to people dying suddenly, we see images and clips relating to the following: MK-Ultra, CIA and Project Mockingbird, Lee Harvey Oswald and the JFK assassination, green screens with IS beheadings and Zelensky and George Bush's WMDs, and Alex Jones wearing a tinfoil hat, and the collapse of the WTC Building 7, and the moon landing footage, and UFOs and Bigfoot, and what appears to be the Loch Ness Monster. What was the point of interspersing the montage with all this conspiracy theory fodder? Was it to plant in the reader's mind that what they were about to see was on a par with Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster? That only a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist would pay attention to the material in this movie? This is just like every other conspiracy theory out there. Whatever other possible reason could there be to associate your movie with those things, unless your goal was to discredit it in the eyes of every observer who's not into conspiracy theories? If the goal is to reach a wider audience, the documentary shoots itself in the foot in the opening scenes, doesn't it? And this is according to Josh Geitzkov, who says Died Suddenly is typical trash from Stu Peters, the same guy who discredited us with the COVID is snake venom garbage. Really? Yeah, as he reminds us, Peters is the guy who brought us the now totally discredited film that tried to make the case that COVID was deadly because it had similarities to snake venom and was spread through tainted water. He and his team are either terrible at vetting credible information, or they're engaged in a deliberate campaign to discredit the health freedom movement. That's something we're going to come back to, folks. Moving on. Steve Kirsch here points out the damage this has done to us. The big point is that the fact checkers now are conveniently ignoring the primary claim about the embalmers. And that's the meat of the story here. Over 100 embalmers are seeing never-before-seen clots, only in people who've been vaccinated or received blood transfusions. The embalmers I've talked to are seeing these clots in over half the deaths. That fact check is silent on the major point of this movie. There's no reason for that. There's a reason for that. There's no way to refute it. So by having all that junk in there, it allows the mainstream to focus on that and not focus on the meat of the matter. So now let's move it beyond the analysis of Robert Malone and into the issue of pure CIA fakery, what I call CIA fakery, because truth of the matter is what these people are writing about here have been on to for 15 years. Let's just dig and see how. Here's a healthfeedback.org article about the clots which were sent by embalmer to a laboratory for analysis, and saying that it doesn't demonstrate any link between these clots and the vaccines. And it says Mike Adams' flawed analysis. And when I saw it, I went, Mike who? Okay, I knew this was a pile of bull turd, and now, if it involves Mike Adams, I've been on this dude for so long. Yeah, That's the story. So let's just check out what's that about. The laboratory in question is owned by columnist Mike Adams, founder of the website Natural News, where the results of the analysis were published. This website previously published false claims, including claims that vaccines cause cancer and they will lead to a vaccine holocaust. Whatever. It's Mike Adams, the natural health ranger from Natural News, the world's top news source on natural health, he says, and a sterling campaigner for the truth and a guy who's on our side. Except, no, he is not. Never has been. Back in 6th of May 2008, I warned people about this guy. I said, watch out for that guy, Mike Adams of Natural News. He's a fake. Natural News is not what it seems. It turns out, you see, that Natural News, maybe I'll just increase the size of that. It turns out that Natural News was involved back in 2007 with Rima Libo and General Albert Burt Stubblebine of the Natural Solutions Foundation and Health Freedom USA. Health Freedom USA was apparently knocked offline for several days due to a denial of service attack, and they were bemoaning that they were being knocked off the internet. This is Mike Adams, back in 2007, that him and Rima Libo were being knocked off the internet. Rima Libo and her husband, General Stubblebine. Who's General Stubblebine? He's US Army retired, General Stubblebine. Tell me more. Well, he's this guy, Major General Albert Stubblebine III, US intelligence chief involved in psychokinetics. Obituary. Major General Albert Burt Stubblebine, who's died on his 87th birthday. This is Mike Adams' pal, was head of US Army intelligence in the early 80s, and he was nicknamed Spoonbender for his belief in the use of psychic and telepathic powers in warfare. That was later evoked in Grant Heslow's film The Men Who Stare at Goats, starring George Clooney. That's who I was warning everybody about back in 2008. And here, if you want the full details and the links to all this back research, folks, is in the description of the video. And here's the letter from April the 27th, 2007, from John Hamill, the president of International Advocates for Health Freedom, and writing to General Stubblebine about how he's announcing himself to be a specialist on the art of disinformation, citing 3 different types of disinformation being used to confuse vitamin consumers. And he's wondering then how many people would ever suspect from reading this section of the Natural Solutions Foundation website that the Natural Solution Foundation themselves will be disseminating disinformation. And he just blew the whistle on everything these people were up to. This disinformation crew, General Albert Burt Stubblebine, who's linked to Mike Adams, and now we know that Mike Adams is the laboratory where this stuff was done. And all of that was the involvement of Mike Adams, Rima Libo, and General Albert Burt Stubblebine to discredit health freedom around the time of Codex Alimentarius, and genuine health freedom campaigners were complaining that this bunch of goons were screwing it up for the genuine campaigners attempting to influence the international debate on Codex Alimentarius. That's the background, not only of Mike Adams, but also of Stu Peters. So Stu Peters, Mike Adams, that's where you begin to connect the dots and realize that this is, in fact, CIA fakery we're looking at. I use that as a generic term. It means intelligence operatives who pretend to be what they are not. And so I have a word of caution for Dr. Robert Malone, rising out of some of the things he wrote in that article. Let's check it. He says, as I stated previously, I could care less about a former bounty hunter, that's Stu Peters, who started a podcast to take down Alex Jones and has seemingly sought to replace him by becoming a sort of well-financed, where did that come from, second-tier shadow projection mimic of a shock jock. Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. This is the guy. Meet the new Alex Jones. Conspiracy nut with a troubling criminal past, that's Stu Peters, is MAGA's new favourite shock jock. And there's Stu. And there on the left is his previous incarnation as a bounty hunter, where he was fond of dressing up as a sort of pseudo police officer. Well, it's good because it helps to intimidate people, and that's valid safety precaution when you're carrying out a dangerous job. But the new Alex Jones, apparently. Well, Robert Malone goes on in his article, Alex Jones, whatever his personal flaws, is the real deal. Just read his book, which analyses the Klaus Schwab King George III Great Reset agenda, solid, factual and insightful. Is it indeed, Robert? Just a second. You have your field of expertise, Robert, and I have mine. And you need to talk to people about Alex Jones. Let me assure you, as somebody who has been tracking him since the mid-90s, that Alex Jones has done more damage to the cause of truth than any other individual on the planet other than David Icke. And that's saying something, Robert. Time and time and time again, he has been used to discredit us in exactly the same way as Stu Peters. So, yeah, I know you're smart and I know you're new in the game too. So you got to remember that many of us were fighting these issues on Kari Mullis's criticisms of PCR testing when we were taking on the mainstream on the issue of HIV/AIDS back in that era of the 2000s, 2001, around 9/11. These were key, critical, important times in this battle before you showed up. And in those times and during those years, Alex Jones was the Stu Peters. So just be a bit careful when you're saying that Alex Jones, whatever his personal flaws, is the real deal. No, it's deeper than that, and it's all CIA fakery. Whether it's Stu Peters or Alex Jones or David Icke, just three of a cast of characters, all well-funded, all networked and linked to each other, all promoting each other, and all sharing the same themes, memes, and creating an information landscape designed to make sure that we do not progress in our agendas because we've got these CIA fakes embedded in our movements. So I outed that back in 2005 when I listed 108 websites. You can Google CIA fakes breakfornews.com and you'll probably find that article even though Google's downranked it. So this battle between those of us who are telling the truth about the alternative media and its population by these fakes and the fakes themselves is the battle of the real truth versus the well-funded pseudo-truth, which helps to confuse and mislead and serves to hinder our onward progress. So keep your eyes open for all of that, folks, and pass the word on to Robert Malone if he isn't up to speed on Alex Jones. All right, that's it for this edition of The Beautiful Truth. I love telling the truth. Not looking for your money, not looking to swamp you with fear porn, just to give you realistic truth of what's really going on. And I'll be back with more of it quite soon. Hope you'll join me for that too. Looking forward to it. But in the meantime, for breakfornews.com, this has been Fintan Dunn reporting. See you soon.